So I'm here to talk to you about my design philosophy. It's a philosophy called Metamodernism, sort of a new pedagogy for design in the modern age, because a lot of the tools that are very relevant to design today didn't exist when a lot of the people who now practice the pedagogy went through school themselves. So this is what a lot of people think about when they get told about 3D printing, tea, Earl Grey, hot. The replicators aren't quite here yet, but we are heading in that direction. But there's a huge gap between where we are today and getting to this. And this is today. We are successfully printing auto bodies out of metal, printing custom fashion objects that are biomechanical in nature. This is by Nook Ruprecht. She is actually the curator of the art space that we have going on next door. And then the auto body, that's by a company called And the promise of all these awesome 3D printed things is in reaction to where we've gotten to with mass production and industrial design up until this point, which has all been known as the revolution. The industrial revolution happened when we invented the first robots and machines and assembly lines, sort of in the 50s and 60s and 70s, that sort of created the globalized world that we're used to right now. Mass produce a lot of stuff, do it cheaply, probably do it in China, ship it back over here. The whole process takes a very long time. And what the new revolution in technology kind of, clicky. And some. Oh, there we go. Cool. So the third industrial revolution that's sort of underway right now is what happens when manufacturing technology gets smaller and has the opportunity to become local. What we've seen sort of happen in the food movement in the last 15 years with farm to table and localism is starting to happen with manufacturing, because now you can manufacture very the destination that you're going to. And sort of the theme for tonight's event is on-demand manufacturing. Is where we're headed, which is the ability to manufacture something after it's been purchased, not before. So when you do that, you can make that thing very appropriate to whatever the use case that somebody wants it to be is, or however stylistically or personal they want that object to be. And this is all being enabled right now by 5 key technologies. 3D printing gets most of the attention and the love, but the other 4 are equally as important. Robotics. I used to work for a firm in Oakland, and we used to buy old robots off of car companies that were just retooling because they needed a faster, better robot. And we would buy these big industrial machines for like $5,000 a pop. And experiencing that a couple of years ago, I noticed something, that trend's going to continue, that the robots that we build are actually far more durable and live far longer than the factories that use them, and that on a long enough timeline, you're going to get more and more robots accessible to a lot more people. When you combine that with what's happening with 3D scanning right now, a lot of people don't know it, but the Xbox that's in tens of millions of homes across the country right now is a very capable 3D scanner. The first one was quite capable, but the Kinect V2, which is on the Xbox One, is a phenomenally capable 3D scanner, and people are just starting to figure that out, and there's a lot that is enabled by that and other cheap scanning technologies that are now available. Then everyone's starting to get hip to virtual reality getting popular. It's not just Oculus Rift. Now people are starting to use cell phones for VR devices, and now we have all kinds of new ways to interact with 3D content that we couldn't before. And then the last, and maybe the biggest key, is the cloud. So it was the case that for a long time, cloud computing was only CPU based. It was only good for data computation. But now you have things called GPU clouds, like the Autodesk Spark platform that they just built, where you can do really heavy processor intensive graphics computation that never happened until maybe a year ago. And now all of a sudden, there's a lot more horsepower to put behind very interesting applications. And so where I'm focusing, what a lot of people don't know, is that 3D printed medical devices actually lead the world of 3D printed products. The best-selling 3D printed product in the world are Invisalign braces, and the number 2 is hearing aids. 90% of all hearing aids are 3D printed, but people just don't know that. They just assume they're things that fit really well. And that's what 3D printing is good at, is making things that fit very well. So my startup, Metamason, we focused on something that fits very badly, which is a CPAP mask. This is a disorder that affects 1 in 4 men and 1 in 9 women over age 30. Anybody you know who snores has early stage sleep apnea and eventually will need to be on CPAP treatment. But not to worry, there is a better solution than the ugly, ugly mask you see right there. There's ours, which is a custom silicone 3D printed mask that's completely conformal to the user's face, so it's as comfortable and as easy to wear as possible. And so we see that as a much better solution than trying to mash a generic shape into everyone's face, which leaves nasty marks on them when they wake up in the morning and leaks and is, not fun. And so our process is to scan the user, to use a parametric algorithm, a generative design algorithm to fit that product to them with as much of what we know about them as possible, and then to create something for them that is as much for them as we can make it. So if we abstract a little bit, if I step away from pitching my startup and think more about my philosophy, this breaks down into 3 buckets. And we call those buckets input, which is the collection of data. That's not just a 3D scanner, that's a microphone, that's kinematics, that's video, it's thermal imaging, it's any kind of data you can capture about the world around you. And then you interface with that data, you apply algorithms to it, you give it purpose, you give it function, you have it figure out what should it be doing, and then you instantiate it. And so instantiate is a fancy word for making something real, but in this case you could be making that object virtually. And so it's a meta object. So, whether it's in a VR environment, augmented reality environment, or a physical object that you 3D print, it's ultimately the same sort of end goal. So everyone's familiar with Iron Man. This is sort of the pop culture reference that people think about when they think about, all of the things that are happening in digital design. But this particular scene has a lot going on in it that, kind of gets glossed over. He's sticking his hand into a holographic image that is aware of his hand and custom fitting all of those objects to his arm. And he's also interacting with that content and manipulating it. And so this is sort of a metamodernism in, a 20-second movie scene. You've got the mixed reality of him inputting the data of his arm and interfacing with it by controlling it, but then his, robots and machinery on demand fabricates it, so there it is instantiated. And so people in the printing industry keep talking about this sort of mythical killer app that's supposed to come and make printing accessible to everyone. But that app isn't here yet, and a lot of us are getting pretty frustrated about it because focusing on printers is kind of like focusing on computers really hard in the early days of personal computing, when we were geeking out on the actual hardware so much that we forgot that we had to make it usable and approachable and useful for normal people. And so in those early days, there were fax machines, there were early word processors, there were laser printers, but it wasn't until software came along and unified them, Word, Photoshop, Excel, that these things got usable for people so that they could focus on what they wanted to make and not the tools for making it. And so that's what metamodernism is all about, is that tying everything together in a curated and easy to approach experience. And so in Iron Man terms, that's Jarvis. He's the one who's actually doing all the hard work. It's not Tony Stark, it's Jarvis who's figuring out how to make everything. Tony's just being a client, so to speak. And that's what I think good software should be doing, a good design should be doing moving forward. And so instead of printing tabletops full of tchotchkes and junk, we might actually be able to make things that are useful for people. And there are people already doing this. This is Ethor Bender. He's a friend of mine who runs a company called Unique, and they do 3D printed prosthetics. So they scan somebody's healthy leg, or I should say existing leg, and then in addition to figuring out what the other leg should be shaped like, what should it be styled like? What is the psychological connection that that wearer should have to their leg to make it feel like them, so that it's something that can be personal and something that they have a personal connection to. Then this is a company called Nervous Systems. Jessica Rosenkrantz and Jesse Rosenberg makes these really, really awesome 3D tools. And I'm going to show you one of them now. So they create these customization tools that live in the web that allows anybody, even a speaker in mid-presentation, to mess around with little controls and build really cool customizable objects. And you don't have to be a master of 3D content to do this. And you can see on the bottom, or wait, you can't see that. So you can see here that I can like manipulate this and turn it around and do all kinds of funny stuff with it. And I don't have to be a master 3D designer to be able to manipulate this stuff. It just kind of, works. And it works in a browser on the web, which is, really, really cool. And so that's a great example of doing something that's useful for people that allows anyone who's not a designer to make objects that they can print themselves. Now, this is Melanie Gannon, and she's a grad student right now at Carnegie Mellon, believe it or not, but she's doing these amazing 3D printed objects that are based on these algorithms. And to close, I want to show you one of her algorithms because it's just so beautiful. This is something she calls crossing the divide. And maybe the audio on this will play, maybe not. Let's see. Do I have any audio? So what she did was she created this algorithmic squid, and so the squid moves around and there's some kind of cool tracking. You've got a person standing in the scene, and using a Kinect, it's controlling the squid around the scene. And so some human control, some algorithmic control. And that is the printed object that she ended up making from it. And so that's sort of metamodernism in its full beauty at work. None of the designers I mentioned know that they're metamodernists. I'm going to tell them later. And so with that, I will open it up for any questions. Right over there.
Hi there. What are some hi there, Les. What are some other devices that you think you'd like to start working on after your sleep apnea mask? Are there anything in particular?
So our company, having a method to 3D print silicone, has a laundry list of potential applications. The ones that have leapt out to us initially are pollution masks for the Chinese market in particular, scuba masks as well, but then getting away from facial stuff to things like knee braces, elbow braces, possibly even getting into bike seats or any kind of grips, any place where there's a squishy biomechanical interface with something that is sort of purpose-driven in terms of what you're doing as in the activity, is sort of an appropriate place for our technology to play. Other questions?
Your 3D printing of silicon, is that a new material that's recently printable, or is that something that you worked on? Or?
So he asked, is 3D printing silicone new? And yes. Metamason is one of the only companies in the world to successfully 3D print silicone. We have a hack, a sort of workaround that allows us to do it, but it is unique to, our technique is unique to us.
What was the device that you were wearing in your last presentation?
It was one of, she asked what was the device was I wearing in the last presentation that Dougie mentioned earlier, and it was one of our CPAP masks. Any other questions? In the back.
One can go to hack the Connect?
There are a lot of good web blogs on Connect hacking. The first name that comes to mind is Dougie and I have a friend named Sammy Kamkar, who's a really, really good hacker, and he's done a lot of amazing things with Connect hacking, but we can talk offline about that.
Forgive me if you've already said this. Being that you're a startup, are these, like the sleep apnea thing, is that available for purchase yet, or is it, where are you in your process?
So we're mid-regulatory right now, and still fundraising if anybody is an investor in the room. But we are working through the 510K process. We've probably got another 4 or 5 months until we receive our 510K, at which A 510K is an FDA approval for a device that has a predicate device. So it's an easier FDA approval pathway than a PMA, for example. All right, it's a 5 or 6 month long FDA approval process that is not super difficult to get through, though it will cost us about 150K to get through. But after which time, as we have said approval, we will be going into clinical trials. After we do some clinical trials to generate some marketing data, we look to be launching at the end of 2016.
Hi, great talk. I'm really interested in how this might intersect with healthcare and public health, and I'm wondering, what does this cost? Like, what is the cost of 3D printing in terms of the time it takes to create an ear device or, Invisalign, and how much does it cost for the product itself?
So it's she asked how much does it cost to 3D print things, and it's an extremely fast moving target. So the company Siemens did a projection recently that 3D printing is going to decrease in price 50% over the next 5 years, while increasing in speed 400% over the next 5 years. In the past 3 months, we have seen a 100-fold increase in the fastest printer in the world. And there's very much an arms race, and I release a faster printer, and then not me, but some company releases a faster printer, somebody else one-ups them, a few weeks later somebody else one-ups them. And so you have to amortize how many parts can one machine make during the course of a day to figure out like how expensive or valuable that part is going to be relative to its printing price. Our mask today costs something like $400 or $500 to produce. On another machine that has just been released, that will probably be like $200 to produce. On a machine that I know about but don't have access to, that might be as low as $50 to produce. So it's kind of dependent on who your friends are.
Quick question, that spurred me to think: is the industry set up where everybody is buying, and everybody has to just kind of accept that you buy it when you need it, because in another couple of years it won't be worth much? Or are there businesses set up where they're allowing people to rent, and much like solar cells and other things, where you have this moving target where there's an economy set up to account for that?
So there are these organizations called service bureaus which sell the machines, but they also sell time on the machine. So locally in town, there's one called CAD Blue. There's another one in Valencia called Solid Concepts, another one called Sycon Technologies. These guys will sell you a printer for a few $100,000 or sell you a part from a printer for like a few $100s. And that business model is evolving really rapidly. So some people are leasing, some people are not leasing. It's sort of a negotiate what you can sort of environment right now. Way back.
I had a question on, so the actual material that you're printing with, the silicon, are you guys building it proprietary? Are you building it, or are you purchasing it? So who are your partners in actually making the material?
So our masks are currently produced by a service bureau called Sycon Technologies in Valencia. They have a USP Class 6 certification, which means they are certified to produce medical grade devices. And that's the short answer to that.
Okay. And the printers themselves?
We are using 3D Systems ProJet 3500 CPXs.
So nice.
In the front row again? Oh, hold on. We got to wait for the mic for you. It's coming right up.
Thanks. You mentioned, I think, parametric software when you were talking about like the face and then adapting your device to the face. Can you say what that is?
So initially, our algorithms are written in a software package called Grasshopper, which is a plugin for a modeling environment called Rhino. Eventually, we'll have to rebuild all of the scripts that we've written in Grasshopper in Python and WebGL and JavaScript. There are a huge variety of generative programming languages out there. I learned Grasshopper in architecture school, so that's what I know. And there's a lot of support for that in the Open NURBS community, which is an open source community online of people who are doing generative design. But that's something that I can wax poetic on for a long time, so we can talk about that afterwards if you want.
Thank you.
Do you foresee one day people having these printers in their own homes and pirating your software and printing their own Invisalign and sleep apnea masks?
So yes and no. There's a huge gap between industrial grade printers and consumer grade printers. And consumer grade printers are pretty good at making lightweight plastic things that generally speaking aren't very durable. The machines that are capable of producing sort of highly durable, high material quality variety parts are really, really expensive. As far as the software, our software is going to be completely cloud-based because the computation is so heavy to utilize it that it has to be done on like a big cloud server farm somewhere. And so it's always going to be accessing that cloud. That code would never be feasible for anybody to try to manipulate on their own on a desktop machine. Any other questions? James. James asked about sex toys. It's a hilarious. No, it's a really serious question. So when you can 3D print silicone, you get approached about this a lot. I have a friend with a startup in Brooklyn called Dame Products, female-founded adult toy company, and they have a very sanitized brand and have also a very clever device. And we've actually started talking to them about possibly collaborating on creating a line of adult toys using their brand and sort of, it's a female-run company, so they've got a lot of sensitive focus to the subject, but our technology could enable them to do some interesting things.
In terms of the industrial scale machines that you use, what's the lifespan of the greater part of those machines? Because I would imagine you talk about you have your own technique for curing the silicone when you're building it up. Wouldn't that have to be a separate component that's inserted into a pre-existing machine? And if that's the case, does that mean that the lifespan of the larger machine can extend for many years, and whatever kind of printing head you're using can be updated?
So he asked about lifespan of machines, and the answer is, first off, our process is a multi-stage process that involves both a printer and a couple of secret sauce steps after the print is done. As far as the lifespan of the machine, 3D printers in general work for a very long period of time, but their economic viability is more a function of their speed relative to how functional they are. So if I can buy a new machine that can print 3 times as fast, I will amortize the cost of that machine really, really quickly. So I'm going to get rid of the old one and get the fastest one I can get my hands on, because that's going to pay for itself much, much faster many times over. So the economics of machine speed has a lot more to do than its effective life.